Chosen one, can you feel it? That weight pressing on your chest right now, that's not anxiety, that's God's hand stopping you mid-step. Have you ever stood at the edge of something and felt your entire body scream, "Stop"? Have you ever reached for a door handle and heard a voice whisper, "Not that one"? Have you ever been one word away from saying something that would change everything and something grabbed your tongue? Listen to me carefully. Right now, in this exact moment, some of you are standing on a line you can't see, a boundary, a threshold. I'm not talking about sin you already know about. I'm talking about the line God draws in the sand of your life and whispers, "Beyond this point, I cannot protect you the way I have been protecting you." You didn't stumble onto this message by accident. The algorithm didn't bring you here. God intercepted your scroll because you're standing closer to that line than you realize, and He's giving you one last warning before the fog lifts and you see how close you were to the edge. The line isn't always obvious, beloved. It doesn't glow. It doesn't have warning signs. Sometimes it looks like a harmless conversation. Sometimes it looks like a reasonable decision. Sometimes it looks like justice, like standing up for yourself, like finally taking what you deserve. But here's the terrifying truth. The line is like the edge of a cliff hidden under morning fog. You can't see it, but one step, just one, and gravity takes over. And by the time you realize what you've done, you're already falling. I need to pause here and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and sow that seed of faith. But right now, if you feel God tapping your shoulder, if something in your spirit just shifted when I mentioned that line, I need you to do something. Type in the comments, "I hear you, Lord." Don't scroll past this. Don't ignore the warning. Let heaven see your obedience before you take another step. Because Psalm 16:5-6 says this, "Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places." Did you catch that? Boundary lines. God sets them, not to cage you, but to keep you in pleasant places, safe places, protected places. But what happens when you cross them? Why hasn't God answered you yet? Why does the sky feel like stone when you pray? Why, after 70 years of faithfulness, does it seem like heaven itself has turned its back on you? Let me ask you something that might shatter you. What if God's silence isn't rejection? What if it's the most terrifying form of His attention? You've been there, haven't you? On your knees at 3 a.m., whispering the same prayer you've whispered for months, maybe years. Your voice cracks, your tears fall, and the room stays quiet. So quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. So quiet you wonder if anyone's listening at all. Your children don't call anymore. Your body is betraying you one joint at a time. The bills keep coming, but the miracles keep hiding. And you pray. Oh, how you pray. But heaven feels like a locked door with no one home. Here's what breaks my heart. You think the silence means God forgot about you. You think the quiet means you're not important enough for His attention. You've started to believe that maybe, just maybe, you've been praying to an empty throne. But what if I told you something that will change everything you think you know about divine silence? Heaven went quiet, because heaven was watching. Let me take you to 1 Kings chapter 19. Elijah, the mighty prophet who called down fire from heaven, who shut up the sky for 3.5 years, who made kings tremble, this same Elijah is sitting under a broom tree begging God to let him die. "I have had enough, Lord," he says. "Take my life." And you know what God does? Nothing. At first. Just silence. But then God sends an angel. Not with answers, not with explanations, with bread, with water, with rest. And after Elijah eats and sleeps, the angel comes again. "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." What journey? Elijah didn't know there was a journey coming. He thought he was done. He thought God was finished with him. But God was silent because God was preparing him for 40 days and 40 nights that would lead to a cave where everything would change. The silence wasn't absence, beloved. It was preparation for a meeting with the Almighty himself. You see, God doesn't go quiet because he's abandoned you. He goes quiet because he's repositioning you. He clears the stage, removes the noise, the distractions, the false voices, so he can rearrange the next act of your life without interference. Think about it. When a surgeon operates, does he do it in a crowded, noisy room? No. He clears the operating theater. Everyone who isn't essential to the procedure must leave. It gets quiet, intensely quiet, because what's about to happen requires precision, focus, and absolute control. You're in surgery right now, divine surgery, and God has cleared the room. Heaven went quiet, because heaven was watching. But here's where it gets dangerous. Here's where the enemy comes in, because the devil knows something about silence that most believers don't understand. Silence is the space where doubt grows fastest. In the quiet, lies sound like truth. In the stillness, fear sounds like wisdom. And so he whispers, if God really loved you, he would answer. If you were really chosen, you wouldn't be going through this. Maybe you crossed the line already. Maybe you're too late. Maybe you're too old. Maybe God's moved on to someone younger, someone better, someone who didn't make the mistakes you made. Stop right there. Job sat in silence for 7 days before his friends said a word. 7 days of staring at the ash heap of his life, wondering what he did wrong, wondering why God allowed this, wondering if the blessing he once had was gone forever. But Job 42:12 tells us the end of the story. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. Not the same, more. The silence wasn't the end, it was the setup for double restoration. You think you're being forgotten. You're being positioned. You think you're being ignored. You're being inspected. God is examining your next step so carefully, so precisely, that he can't afford any static in the line between heaven and your spirit. Heaven went quiet, because heaven was watching. Moses spent 40 years in silence before the burning bush. Joseph spent years in silence before the palace. David spent years in caves before the crown. Paul spent 3 years in the Arabian desert in silence before he ever preached a single sermon. Your silence isn't wasted time. It's not punishment. It's not evidence that you missed your moment. Your silence is God making sure that when he speaks, when he moves, when he releases what he's been holding back, you'll be strong enough to carry it, wise enough to steward it, and humble enough not to claim credit for it. But you need to understand something urgent. The silence is also a test, not of your faith. God already knows that. It's a test of your obedience. Will you cross the line while he's quiet? Will you take matters into your own hands? Will you make permanent decisions based on temporary silence? Abraham didn't wait for God's promise. He listened to Sarah and took Hagar. That moment of impatience created Ishmael, and that mistake is still causing conflict 4,000 years later. One decision made in silence echoing through millennia. Saul didn't wait for Samuel. He offered the sacrifice himself. And in that moment of impatience, he lost his kingdom. 1 Samuel 13:13 records the devastating words, "You have done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you." The silence is not permission to act. The silence is an invitation to trust. If you've been walking through that silence, if you've been living in that space between the promise and the fulfillment, between the calling and the manifestation type, these 3 words in the comments, still I trust. Because, beloved, what you do in the silence will determine what God can do in the sound. But there's something else about this silence you need to understand before we go any further. Something that will explain why God is being so careful with his next word to you. You want to know what breaks my heart? It's watching God's chosen ones, people who've survived wars, buried spouses, raised children through hell, throw it all away because they thought one small step wouldn't matter. Let me tell you something that's going to shake you. The line God draws isn't a wall. It's not a fence you can see from a mile away. It's a thin strand of spiritual wire, invisible until the moment you touch it. And by then, beloved, it's already too late. I'm talking about the line of compromise. That moment when you say, "Just this once, Lord. Just this one time, I'll bend the rules. Just this one conversation with that person you told me to let go. Just this one lie to cover up what I'm ashamed of. Just this one return to the bottle, the pills, the relationship that almost destroyed me." You think God won't notice one step? Let me read you something that should terrify every believer. Galatians 5-7 chapter 9 says, "You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth?" That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. Did you catch that? A little yeast, not a lot, not a truckload, a little. One compromise, one step across that line, and it corrupts the whole spiritual life you've spent 70, 80, 90 years building. But there's another line some of you are dancing with right now. The line of bitterness. You've been holding on to that grudge so long, it's become part of your identity. Your daughter hasn't called in 3 years. Your son chose his wife's family over you. Your church pushed you aside after decades of faithful service. And now you lie awake at night, rehearsing what you'd say if you ever got the chance. Planning your revenge. Feeding your anger like it's a pet that needs to be kept alive. Here's what you don't realize. Bitterness isn't just an emotion. It's a threshold. And the moment you cross from hurt into hatred, from pain into poison, you step over a line that changes everything. Hebrews 12:15 warns us, "See to it that no one falls short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many." That word defile, in the original Greek it means to stain, to contaminate, to pollute. Your bitterness doesn't just hurt you, chosen one. It poisons everyone around you. Your grandchildren feel it. Your neighbors sense it. Even strangers can smell the death on you. Is that grudge worth your anointing? Then there's the line of returning to old behaviors. I'm talking to someone right now who knows exactly what I mean. You've been clean for 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20. You walked away from that addiction, that relationship, that lifestyle that nearly killed you. You stood at the funeral of your old self and declared, "Never again." But lately, you've been having conversations you shouldn't be having. Looking at things you promised God you'd never look at again. Entertaining thoughts you buried years ago, and you're telling yourself, "I'm stronger now. I can handle it. I'm just curious. It won't go anywhere." That's the enemy's favorite lie. Because he knows something you've forgotten. The line you cross going back is always easier to cross than the line you crossed getting free. Someone listening to my voice right now, you are inches from that line. Inches. And you think nobody knows. You think you're hidden in your living room, your bedroom, your secret thoughts. But God sees, and He's not just watching, He's warning. The enemy doesn't destroy you with a leap, beloved. He destroys you with a step. One conversation leads to one meeting. One meeting leads to one compromise. One compromise leads to one night you can't take back. And suddenly, you're standing in the wreckage of everything you built, wondering how you got there. But here's the line that terrifies me most. The line of losing your spiritual identity. This is when you stop seeing yourself as chosen and start seeing yourself as ordinary. When you stop believing God has plans for you and start believing your age disqualifies you. When you trade your prophetic voice for comfortable silence because speaking truth costs too much. You were marked before you were made. You carry heaven's DNA. But the moment you agree with the enemy's lies about who you are, you cross a line from destiny into defeat. You don't lose your salvation, but you lose your power. You don't stop being called, but you stop walking in your calling. And that, dear one, is a tragedy that makes angels weep. Right now, I need you to do something. If you're standing near any of these lines, compromise, bitterness, old behaviors, lost identity, and you're making a decision right here, right now, that you will not cross it. I need you to type in the comments, "Not today, devil." Say it out loud where you're sitting, declare it over your life. Draw your own line in the sand and tell hell, "You can't have me, not today, not ever." Because what I'm about to tell you next will explain exactly what happens the moment someone crosses that line, and why some never make it back. You think you're just making decisions. You think you're just living your life, weighing options, choosing paths. But let me tell you something that's going to shake you to your core. Every decision you make is being watched, recorded, documented in realms you cannot see. Right now, as I speak these words, there is a courtroom session happening over your life. Heaven and hell are both present. Angels are standing as witnesses to your faithfulness. Demons are submitting evidence of every moment you wavered, every time you almost crossed that line, every secret thought you believed no one knew about. And God, the judge of all creation, is watching your next move. You see, beloved, the battle for your next season isn't happening in your bank account. It's not happening in your doctor's office. It's not even happening in your family drama. And the weapon being used against you isn't a sword. It's influence, whispers, suggestions that sound so much like your own thoughts that you can't tell the difference. Daniel 10:13 reveals something terrifying. "The prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me." Did you catch that? Daniel prayed, and for 3 weeks his answer was delayed because of warfare in the heavenly realms, invisible battles, spiritual resistance, angels fighting demons just to get God's message through. That delay you've been experiencing, that door that won't open, that breakthrough that keeps getting pushed back. What if I told you it's not God ignoring you, it's hell blocking you? Because the enemy knows that if you step into your next season with your anointing intact, with your integrity uncompromised, with your hands clean and your heart pure, you become unstoppable. But if he can get you to cross that line just once, if he can get you to compromise just a little bit, to justify just one decision that you know in your spirit is wrong, then he can submit that evidence in the courtroom of heaven and say, "See, they're disqualified. They chose this. They knew better. And they did it anyway." Listen to me carefully. You are not fighting flesh and blood. Ephesians 6:12 makes it crystal clear. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. That person who betrayed you, they're not your real enemy. That family member who abandoned you, they're not the source of your pain. They're just being used, manipulated. The real battle is happening behind the scenes, and most people don't even know they're in a war. But you're different, you're chosen, and that's exactly why the warfare against you has been so intense. Think about your life for a moment. Think about the last 5 years. How many times have you been right on the edge of something beautiful, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, chaos erupted? How many times have you been about to walk into your breakthrough, and then a crisis hit that demanded all your attention? How many times have you been one decision away from your destiny, and then someone said something, did something, triggered something that made you want to react in a way you know you shouldn't? That's not coincidence, beloved. That's strategy. Hell's strategy. And it works because most people don't recognize they're being played. Heaven is watching the next step. The angels assigned to your life are leaning in, praying you'll choose wisely. But the demons assigned to your destruction are also watching, waiting for you to step over that line so they can run to the accuser and say, "It's done, they crossed it, they're ours now." And here's what breaks my heart. So many believers cross that line thinking it's no big deal. They think, "God will forgive me, I'll repent later, it's just this one time." But they don't understand that some lines, once crossed, change the trajectory of everything. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed without consequences. Some seeds, once planted, will grow whether you want them to or not. Galatians 6-7 doesn't lie. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. You cannot plant disobedience and harvest blessing. You cannot cross God's boundary and expect His protection on the other side. You cannot ignore His warning and then cry out for His help when the consequences come. The courtroom is in session right now. Evidence is being submitted. Your private moments, the ones you thought no one saw, they're on the record. Your secret thoughts, the ones you justified and rationalized, they're being presented. Every time you felt that check in your spirit and pushed through it anyway, it's documented. But here's the hope that will save you. The blood of Jesus is still speaking on your behalf. Hebrews 12:24 says, His blood speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. While the accuser is presenting evidence against you, Jesus is presenting His sacrifice for you. While hell is demanding justice, heaven is offering mercy. But you have to choose it. You have to stop walking toward that line. You have to turn around before it's too late. Chosen one, if this message is hitting your spirit right now, if you feel the weight of invisible battles pressing on your chest, like this video, so more believers can hear God's warning. Because someone in your life is standing at their line right now, and they need to know what's really at stake. Heaven is watching the next step. The question is, which direction will you take? You know what breaks my heart? It's not the people who fail trying, it's the people who die wondering. Let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. How many years have you spent in that same rocking chair? Not literally though, maybe literally too. I'm talking about the spiritual rocking chair. The one where you rock back and forth, feeling the gentle motion, the familiar creak of the wood, the safety of staying exactly where you are. It feels good, doesn't it? Predictable, safe. You know every groove in that chair. You've worn it smooth with decades of sitting. But here's the brutal truth that God is whispering to you right now. That rocking chair has never moved you 1 inch forward. Comfort is a beautiful prison, beloved. And you've been serving a life sentence. I'm talking to the 70-year-old who still feels a stirring when they pray. I'm talking to the 85-year-old who has dreams that don't make sense for someone your age. I'm talking to every senior citizen who has buried their calling under the acceptable excuse of, I'm too old now. God is giving you a warning today, not a punishment, a warning. And it sounds like this. Your calling is still alive. Age does not cancel assignment. Comfort does. You want to know what kills more destinies than sin? It's not rebellion. It's not even doubt. It's comfort. It's the slow, quiet agreement with a lie that says, you've done your part. You can rest now. Let the young ones take over. But who told you that? Did God tell you that? Or did your tired body whisper it? Did your disappointed heart suggest it? Did your fearful mind convince you? Look at Moses, 80 years old when God called him from a burning bush. 80. The man was a fugitive, a failure, a has-been shepherd who'd spent 40 years on the backside of a desert thinking his best days were 4 decades behind him. His own family probably told him, Moses, you're too old for this. Stay home. Tend the sheep. Accept where you are. But God said, now you're ready. Not at 40, when Moses tried to deliver Israel in his own strength and murdered a man. Not at 50, when he might have had more energy. At 80, when every logical voice said it was too late. Exodus 7:7 records it plainly. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. 2 old men standing before the most powerful ruler on earth, demanding freedom for millions. The world saw senior citizens. God saw his secret weapons. Or what about Abraham? Genesis 12:4 tells us, Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. 75. God called him to pack up everything he knew, leave his comfort, leave his family's land, and walk toward a promise he couldn't see. No map, no guarantees, just God's voice saying, go. And Abraham went, not because he felt ready, not because it made sense, but because he chose calling over comfort. Here's what nobody tells you about comfort. It's not neutral. Comfort isn't just the absence of pain. Comfort is an active force that slowly, quietly, gently suffocates your purpose. It wraps around you like a warm blanket on a cold night, and before you know it, you can't move. You can't breathe. You can't hear God's voice anymore because the blanket is over your ears, whispering, "Shh, stay still. Don't disturb yourself. You've earned this rest." But that's not God's voice. That's the voice of a destiny dying in its sleep. I need you to feel the weight of what I'm about to say. Right now, in this exact moment, you are standing at a crossroad. One path leads back to your rocking chair, back to your routines, back to your excuses about age and energy, and it's too late for me. That path is smooth, it's comfortable. You know every step of it because you've walked it 10,000 times. But there's another path, and it's rough, it's uncertain. It requires you to stand up from that chair your body has molded itself around. It requires you to admit that the stirring in your chest isn't indigestion, it's God. It requires you to look your family in the eye and say, "I know I'm 73, but I'm not finished yet." This is your moment of truth, beloved. This is the line God is drawing in your life. On one side is comfort, on the other side is calling, and you cannot have both. You cannot stay in the rocking chair and answer the knock at the door. You cannot hold on to the familiar and reach for the impossible. You cannot protect your comfort and fulfill your calling. It's one or the other. And God is warning you right now. If you choose comfort, you will live. You will survive. You will die peacefully in that chair, surrounded by people who will say they had a good life. But you will never know what could have been. You will never discover what God was trying to birth through you in these final years. You will never experience the joy of saying yes when every logical voice said no. Moses didn't get to see the promised land, but he got to stand on a mountain and talk to God face to face. Abraham died before the promise was fully realized, but he died walking, not rocking. They chose calling, and their names echo through eternity. What will your choice echo? If this is your moment, if something in your spirit is screaming that you're not finished, that there's more, that God is still speaking, then don't let this moment pass. Comment right now, "I choose calling," not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Right now. Let heaven see your decision before comfort talks you out of it again. Because what I'm about to show you next will reveal exactly what happens when someone finally stands up from the chair and takes that first step toward the impossible. You know what breaks my heart? It's not the people who never knew God. It's the ones who did, who tasted His goodness, who walked in His favor, who felt His presence like warm sun on their face and then took one step back. Just one. And lost everything. Let me tell you something that might shake you to your core. When you cross the line God drew for your protection, you don't just lose a blessing, you lose your peace first. And peace, beloved, is the currency of heaven. Without it, you're spiritually bankrupt, even if your bank account is full. Think about King Saul. 1 Samuel 15 tells us he was anointed, chosen, set apart by God Himself. But he crossed one line, just one act of disobedience, one moment of thinking he knew better than God. And what happened? Verse 23 says, "Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, He has rejected you as king." But it wasn't immediate, was it? That's the horror of it. Saul kept his crown, he kept his palace, he kept his title, but he lost something far more precious. He lost God's presence. 1 Samuel 16:14 records the most terrifying sentence in Scripture. Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul. Can you imagine waking up one morning and realizing God's presence is gone? Can you imagine going through the motions of prayer but feeling nothing but hollow echoes? Can you imagine looking in the mirror and seeing the same face, the same hands, the same body, but knowing something eternal has left you? That's what happens when you step backward. Chosen one. You don't fall off a cliff immediately. You sink slowly, like quicksand. 1 inch backward pulls your whole life downward. At first, you barely notice. You can still move. You can still function. You tell yourself, "I'm fine. Nothing's changed." But then, you try to pray, and the words feel heavy. You try to worship, and the joy is gone. You try to hear God's voice, and there's only silence. Not because he stopped speaking, but because you moved outside the range where his voice is clear. Lost peace. That's the first cost. Then comes lost clarity. Suddenly, decisions that used to be simple become impossible. Should you call that person? Should you take that job? Should you forgive or walk away? You can't tell anymore because the spiritual discernment you once had is clouded. Proverbs 14:12 warns us, "There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death." When you cross God's line, right and wrong start bleeding together. What once looked obviously dangerous now looks reasonable. What once felt wrong now feels justified. Your moral compass spins wildly, and you're navigating life in spiritual fog. Then the emotional heaviness settles in like winter. You wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. You carry a weight in your chest you can't name. You snap at people you love. You cry for no reason. You feel ancient, even for your age, like your soul is wearing cement shoes. That's not depression, dear one. That's the weight of living outside God's protection. Psalm 32:3-4 describes it perfectly. "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy on me, my strength was sapped." And here's what terrifies me most: delayed blessings. Not cancelled, delayed. God had something beautiful scheduled for your life, a divine appointment, a breakthrough, a moment when heaven and earth were supposed to collide in your favor. But you stepped backward, and now it's postponed. Maybe for months, maybe for years, maybe for the rest of your earthly life. Moses struck the rock in anger when God told him to speak to it. Numbers 20. One moment of crossing the line, one act of disobedience. And what happened? He got to see the promised land, but never enter it. 40 years of faithful leadership. 40 years of miracles, all culminating in standing on a mountain, looking at what could have been, and dying before he could touch it. Is that where you want to end up? Standing at the edge of your blessing, close enough to see it, but never close enough to live in it. Then comes the spiritual disorientation. You start justifying things you used to condemn. You start tolerating things you used to resist. You start calling good evil and evil good. Isaiah 5:20 says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness." Right now, I need you to stop. Just stop. And ask yourself this question. Don't answer out loud. Just let it sink into your soul. Where have you been tempted to step backwards? What relationship is pulling you toward compromise? What bitterness is whispering that revenge is justified? What fear is telling you to take control instead of trusting God? What comfort is promising peace outside of obedience? Whisper this out loud right now, wherever you are. Don't think about who's listening. Just say it. Lord, guide my steps. Heaven hears. Angels are leaning in. God is waiting for your surrender. Because here's the truth that will either save you or haunt you. The line is still behind you. You haven't crossed it yet. You're standing at the threshold, toes curled over the edge, feeling the pull of gravity, but you haven't jumped. But the longer you stand here, the harder it becomes to step back to safety. The enemy is whispering that one step won't matter, that God will understand, that grace covers everything anyway. And grace does cover everything. But grace doesn't remove consequences, it redeems them. And some consequences, beloved, will follow you all the way to your deathbed. So what happens when you finally realize you've crossed the line? When the fog lifts and you see the cliff edge behind you and nothing but air beneath your feet. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. Here's the part that will shatter every ounce of guilt crushing your chest right now. God didn't send this message to punish you, He sent it to catch you. Let me tell you something that's going to wreck you in the most beautiful way. You think you're here because you clicked a video. You think you're watching this because the algorithm suggested it. But what if I told you that God himself reached through the noise of 1,000 videos, grabbed your attention, and pulled you into this moment because he saw where you were headed? You were one step away, one conversation away, one decision away, and heaven moved. Listen to me carefully, beloved. When a shepherd sees his sheep nearing the edge of a cliff, he doesn't wait. He doesn't stand back and watch to see what happens. He doesn't give a gentle suggestion. He runs. He throws himself between the sheep and the danger. He uses his staff not to beat the sheep, but to pull it back before gravity does what gravity does. That's what's happening right now. God isn't standing at a distance shaking his head at you. He's running toward you. This message, this moment, this stirring in your chest, that's his staff pulling you back from an edge you didn't even see. Some of you are sitting there thinking, but you don't know what I've already done. You don't know how close I've gotten. You don't know the conversations I've had, the plans I've made, the lines I've already tested. And you're right. I don't know, but God does. And he's still here, still reaching, still pulling. Do you understand what that means? It means you haven't crossed the final line yet. It means there's still time. It means the boundary isn't behind you, it's in front of you. And God is standing between you and it, arms wide, saying, not on my watch, not my chosen one. Isaiah 30:21 says this, whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. That voice, that's what you're hearing right now, not condemnation, not rejection, direction, divine intervention, God redirecting your steps before you take the one that changes everything. But here's where most people miss it. They think boundaries are punishment. They think God's warnings are evidence that he's disappointed in them, frustrated with them, ready to give up on them, so they run from the warning instead of running toward the safety. Let me flip that lie upside down. Boundaries aren't cages, beloved. They're love letters written in lightning. They're God saying, I know what's on the other side of that line, and I love you too much to let you find out the hard way. Think about it. When you were raising your children or your grandchildren, did you put boundaries around them because you hated them? Did you say, don't touch the stove because you wanted to control them? No. You set boundaries because you knew what they didn't know. You could see the danger they couldn't see. You loved them too much to let them learn through scars. That's God right now. That's what this moment is. He's not taking away your freedom. He's protecting your future. He's not limiting your life. He's preserving it. Every roadblock you've hit lately, every door that slammed shut when you were sure it was supposed to open, every plan that fell apart at the last second, every opportunity that evaporated right when you reached for it. You called it bad luck. You called it the enemy. You called it frustration. But what if it was rescue? What if God has been throwing divine roadblocks in your path because he could see the cliff you couldn't see? What if every no was actually not that way? What if every closed door was God standing in front of a door that leads to destruction? Some of you right now are angry at God because he blocked something you wanted, someone you wanted, some path you were sure was right. But chosen one, what if the thing you're angry about is the very thing that saved your life? God doesn't just set boundaries in your life, he sets them in pleasant places. Psalm 16:6 says, the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. Pleasant places, not prison cells, not punishment zones. Pleasant places, safe places, places where you can breathe, places where you can heal. Places where you can become who you were always meant to be, without the weight of consequences you were never meant to carry. But you have to step back. You have to turn around. You have to let God pull you away from the edge and back into the safety of his boundaries. Right now, your spirit is wrestling with something. Part of you wants to surrender. Part of you wants to fight. Part of you is relieved. Part of you is resistant. That's normal. That's human. But your spirit, that eternal part of you that recognizes God's voice, your spirit knows the truth. This is your moment. This is your rescue. This is God catching you mid-fall before you even left the ground. If you receive this, if you feel heaven pulling you back right now, don't just sit there. Respond. Type in the comments, "I'm stepping back into safety." Let your obedience be your declaration. Let your words become your covenant with God, that you won't take that next step toward the line. Because, beloved, what happens next in your life depends entirely on what you do with this warning. You know what nobody tells you about spiritual warfare? It doesn't always come dressed like a demon. Sometimes it comes dressed like a memory. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you used to trust. Sometimes it sounds exactly like your own voice at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. There are 3 shadows hunting you right now, and if you don't recognize them, they will pull you across that line before you even realize you've moved. Let me introduce you to the enemies that don't announce themselves. The first shadow, familiarity. This one is the most dangerous because it feels like home. It whispers in the voice of yesterday. It shows up as that old friend who suddenly calls after 5 years of silence. It appears as that habit you thought you'd buried, now knocking on your door with a smile that says, "Remember how good this used to feel?" Familiarity says, "Come back, just this once. Nobody needs to know. You're older now, you can handle it. You're wiser. It won't control you like it used to." But here's what Proverbs 26:11 says, "As a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly." Harsh? Yes. True? Absolutely. That relationship that almost destroyed you? That's not nostalgia calling you back, that's a graveyard trying to convince you the corpse still has a pulse. That addiction you fought for 10 years to break free from? That's not just one time, that's a trapdoor to hell disguised as a doorway to relief. The shadow of familiarity speaks with your mother's voice, your father's advice, your own memories edited by time until the poison tastes like medicine. It convinces you that going backward is actually moving forward, that compromise is actually wisdom, that the line you're about to cross is just a suggestion, not a boundary. But God said in Philippians 3:13, "Forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead," leaving it buried. Don't follow the shadow, follow the shepherd. The second shadow, weariness. This one knows your age. It knows your body aches in the morning. It knows you're tired of fighting. And it uses that exhaustion as a weapon. The shadow of weariness tells you to sit down when God is telling you to stand up. It says, "You've done enough. You've prayed enough. You've believed enough. You're too old for this battle. Let someone younger carry the burden. Just rest. Just quit. Just let go." I'm talking to the 70-year-old grandmother who feels too tired to pray for her prodigal grandson anymore. I'm talking to the 80-year-old widower who thinks his spiritual race is over. I'm talking to every senior saint who has let weariness convince them that God's finished with them. But listen to what Isaiah 40:31 promises. "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Notice something. That verse doesn't say young people who hope in the Lord. It says those, anyone, everyone, including you at 85 years old with arthritis and a pacemaker. Weariness wants you to believe that your best days of spiritual warfare are behind you, that your prayers don't carry the same weight anymore, that you should just coast into heaven quietly, without making waves, without disturbing the enemy's plans. But Caleb was 85 years old when he said, "Give me this mountain, not give me a rocking chair, not give me a nursing home. Give me the mountain, give me the giants, give me the impossible." The shadow of weariness is a liar. Your age isn't your limitation, it's your authority. Every gray hair is a trophy from a battle you survived. Every wrinkle is a map of God's faithfulness etched into your face. Don't follow the shadow, follow the shepherd. The third shadow, delay. This one is subtle, sophisticated. It doesn't tell you to quit, it tells you to wait. The shadow of delay whispers, "Nothing's changing anyway. You've waited this long, what's a little longer? God hasn't moved yet, maybe He's not going to." That prophecy over your life, it's been 40 years. Maybe you heard wrong. Maybe it's time to adjust your expectations. It convinces you that obedience can be postponed, that the warning God gave you isn't urgent, that crossing the line just this once won't matter because nothing matters anyway. But Hebrews 3:15 warns, "Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts." Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready. Today. The shadow of delay has killed more destinies than outright rebellion ever could. Because rebellion is obvious, but delay is sophisticated. Delay sounds reasonable. Delay feels safe. Delay convinces you that you're still being faithful while you're actually being disobedient. How many of you have been about to obey God for the last 5 years? How many of you have been almost ready to forgive that person? How many of you have been planning to step into your calling? Eventually. Eventually is another word for never. Don't follow the shadow, follow the shepherd. Here's what you need to understand, beloved. Shadows stretch longest in the evening, and you're in the evening of your life. The sun is setting on your earthly journey, and in that golden hour, these 3 shadows grow enormous. They look bigger than they are, more powerful than they are, more convincing than they are. But even in the evening, especially in the evening, God's light is strong enough to erase every shadow. John 8:12 records Jesus saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Not might have, not could have, will have. If you've battled one of these shadows, if you recognize their voice, their tactics, their lies, I need you to take authority right now. Type in the comments, "No more shadows." Let heaven see your declaration. Let the enemy hear your decision. Because these shadows, they're not just trying to distract you. They're trying to pull you across the line God has drawn for your protection. But what happens when you actually cross it? What does it cost? And more importantly, is there a way back? You think the line is about what you can't do. But what if I told you the line is about what can't reach you? Listen to me, chosen one. Behind every boundary God draws in your life, there's a war you're not supposed to see. There are forces moving, strategies unfolding, assignments being issued in realms your natural eyes can't perceive. And the reason God said stop here isn't because he's withholding something good from you. It's because he's withholding something deadly. Right now, as I'm speaking these words, there are angels assigned to your life, not floating around playing harps working. Hebrews 1:14 calls them ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. They've been stationed at specific coordinates around your life, and that line God drew, that's their perimeter. That's the edge of their jurisdiction to protect you. But here's what most believers don't understand. When you cross that line, you don't just step out of God's will. You step into enemy territory where your angels can't follow. Think about it. Why do you think certain decisions feel heavy before you make them? Why does your chest tighten? Why does your sleep get disrupted? That's not random anxiety, beloved. That's spiritual resistance. That's heaven's alarm system going off, warning you that you're about to walk into a kill zone. The enemy has been studying you for decades. He knows your wounds. He knows your triggers. He knows exactly what bait to use. And he's been setting traps on the other side of that line, waiting for the moment you decide God's boundaries don't apply to you anymore. That relationship that feels so right. There's a reason it can only happen if you compromise your convictions. That business opportunity that seems too good to pass up. There's a reason it requires you to bend your integrity. That conversation you're about to have where you finally speak your truth. There's a reason it can only be said in anger. The devil doesn't need to destroy you with obvious evil. He just needs you to take one step across the line God drew. Because on the other side of that line, your covering changes. Your protection shifts. And suddenly, you're fighting battles you were never meant to fight. But here's the revelation that's going to shatter everything you thought you knew about divine boundaries. Are you ready? The line you think is stopping you is actually stopping what was coming for you. Let that sink in deep. God didn't draw that line to keep you from something you want. He drew it to keep something away from you that you don't see yet. Behind that line is a predator. Behind that line is a destruction with your name on it. Behind that line is a consequence your children and grandchildren would inherit. I'm talking to the grandmother right now who's been tempted to speak those words that would fracture your family forever. You think you're just setting the record straight, but God sees the generational curse that conversation would activate. He sees the bitterness that would poison your bloodline for the next 50 years. I'm talking to the grandfather who's been considering that decision that would give you temporary relief but permanent regret. You think you're just solving a problem, but God sees the door that choice would open, and He sees what's been waiting behind that door to devour you. Many of you carry deep regret about your past. You lie awake replaying decisions you wish you could take back. But let me tell you something that's going to set you free right now. That line God drew today, it's not just protecting your future. It's protecting you from your past, trying to resurrect itself. The devil is a scavenger. He digs up old sins, old patterns, old relationships that should stay buried, and he repackages them. He makes them look different. He convinces you that this time it's okay, this time it's justified, this time God will understand. But God is saying, I already delivered you from that. Don't you dare go back and pick it up again. Behind the line is a battlefield. Before the line is your destiny. You see, every time you obey God's boundary, you're not missing out, you're advancing, you're not being held back. You're being protected so you can move forward into what He's prepared. Ephesians 2:10 says, we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Prepared in advance, that means there's a path already laid out. There's a destiny already designed. But you can only walk it if you stay within the lines. The watchers are observing you right now, not just angels, the cloud of witnesses, your ancestors who prayed for you, the saints who've gone before, and they're not watching to judge you. They're watching to see if you'll be the one who finally breaks the cycle, the one who says no when everyone else said yes, the one who stops at the line when your whole family has a history of crossing it. Heaven is guarding what you're walking toward, but it can only guard you if you stay on the path. I know some of you feel like God's boundaries are restrictive, like you're missing out on life while everyone else is living freely. But freedom without boundaries isn't freedom, beloved. It's falling, and the older you get, the harder the landing. Your body can't recover like it used to. Your heart can't take another betrayal. Your mind can't handle another trauma. Your finances can't survive another crisis. God knows this. That's why He's more protective of you now than He's ever been. If this truth is hitting your spirit like lightning right now, if you can feel the weight of heaven's protection around your life, type, I am protected in the comments. Let the spiritual realm see your declaration, because what I'm about to show you next will explain why some people cross the line and seem fine, while others cross it and their entire world collapses. You know what terrifies me most about the enemy's strategy? It's not that he attacks you when you're weak. Any fool can kick someone when they're down. No, beloved. The devil waits for the moment you feel strongest. The moment you think you've got this figured out. The moment when crossing that line doesn't feel like rebellion, it feels like wisdom. Let me ask you something that might shake you to your core. Have you ever justified something that 6 months ago would have horrified you? Have you ever found yourself saying God would understand about something you know deep down He's been warning you against? Have you ever stood at that line and thought, maybe this one time, maybe for me, maybe it's different? That's not discernment, dear one. That's deception in a Sunday dress. The enemy doesn't paint the line with skulls and crossbones. He paints it with flowers. He makes it look reasonable, logical, even righteous. But God? And the difference between what looks safe and what is safe could cost you everything you've spent 70, 80, 90 years building with Him. Think about Eve in the garden. Genesis 3-6 says, When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. Did you catch that? Good for food, pleasing to the eye, desirable for gaining wisdom. It didn't look like death, it looked like dessert. The most dangerous sins don't announce themselves, they seduce you. Right now, some of you are standing exactly where Eve stood. You're looking at something God clearly said no to, and the enemy is whispering, "But look how good it is. Look how much sense it makes." God doesn't want you to miss out on this blessing, does he? And that voice sounds so reasonable, so mature, so right. But here's what that voice won't tell you. Once you take that step, once you cross that line, something shifts in the spiritual realm. Not because God stops loving you. He never stops loving you. But because you've moved yourself outside the hedge of protection he built around your obedience. Job 1:10 tells us that God put a hedge around Job, his household, and everything he had. But do you know what a hedge is? It's a boundary, a line. And as long as Job stayed within it, the enemy couldn't touch him. But the moment that hedge came down, hell was unleashed. Some of you are about to remove your own hedge, and you don't even realize it. Let me speak directly to something I know is weighing on your heart right now. You're thinking, "But I'm old. I don't have time to waste. If I don't take this opportunity now, I might never get another chance." You're thinking, "I've waited long enough. I've been patient long enough. Surely God doesn't expect me to keep saying no when I'm running out of tomorrows." Listen to me, beloved. God is not testing your age. He is strengthening your wisdom. And wisdom knows that a shortcut across God's line is actually the longest detour you'll ever take. Moses was 80 years old when he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. One moment of impatience. One act that seemed so small, so insignificant. Numbers 20:12 records God's response. "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." 80 years old, 40 years of faithful leadership, and one moment of crossing the line cost him the promised land. Not his salvation, not his relationship with God, but his calling, his destiny, the very thing he'd been working toward his entire life. You think your moment of compromise is small. You think that conversation, that decision, that relationship, that business deal is harmless. The enemy is banking on you believing that lie. Because here's what he knows, and you're forgetting: the line doesn't move, you do. And every time you inch closer, every time you test it, every time you convince yourself just this once, you're training your conscience to ignore God's voice. Proverbs 14:12 says, "There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death." Appears to be right. That's the deception. That's the trap. That's the moment when the cliff is hidden in the fog and you're one step away from free fall. I need you to understand something urgent. The temptation you're feeling right now to justify, to rationalize, to explain away why this situation is different, that's not clarity. That's the final stage before you cross. The enemy always gives you good reasons right before you make bad decisions. But God is giving you this message as a flare in the darkness, as a hand grabbing your shoulder, as a voice shouting, "Stop before you take that step you can't take back." Hebrews 3:15 warns, "Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts." Not tomorrow, not next week, not after you think about it some more. Today, right now, in this moment, while the warning is still fresh, while the Spirit is still speaking, while you can still step back from that edge. If you've been tempted to step where you shouldn't, if something in this message is hitting too close to home, if you feel God's hand on your shoulder right now, type, "Lord, hold me back" in the comments, not as a ritual, as a lifeline, as a declaration that you're choosing obedience over opportunity, wisdom over what looks right. Because what happens next depends entirely on what you do in this moment. The line is in front of you. The choice is yours. But before you decide, you need to hear what happens to those who cross it anyway. You know what haunts me? It's the moment when someone realizes too late that the door God closed wasn't cruelty, it was mercy. That the relationship he ended wasn't rejection, it was rescue. That the plan he delayed wasn't denial, it was divine protection. But you're one of the fortunate ones, because you're here right now, and that means you haven't crossed the line yet. You're still standing on the right side of God's boundary, and what I'm about to tell you is going to shake you to your core. Think back with me for a moment. Think about that relationship that almost happened. You were so sure it was meant to be. You prayed for it. You waited for it. You believed God for it. But then, nothing. The door slammed shut. The person walked away. The timing fell apart. And you felt abandoned. You felt betrayed. You whispered to God in the dark, "Why would you show me this and then take it away?" But what if I told you God wasn't taking something away from you? What if he was taking something away from your path? Listen to me carefully, beloved. There's a difference between what you want and what you can survive. There's a difference between what looks good and what is good for your destiny. And sometimes the greatest mercy God can show you is a closed door. I'm talking to the woman who almost married that man. The one who seemed perfect, charming, successful, said all the right things, but something kept falling through. The timing never lined up. The circumstances kept shifting, and you begged God to make it work. But now, 5 years later, you see the news, you hear the stories. You watch what he did to the woman who came after you, and your knees buckle with the terrifying realization, that was supposed to be me. That's when you understand. God didn't reject your prayer. He answered it by saying no. I'm talking to the man who almost made that business deal. The investment that looked too good to be true. The partnership that promised everything you'd been working toward. You had the papers ready, the signatures lined up. But at the last minute, something fell apart. A delay, a complication, a mysterious problem that made no logical sense. And you were furious. You felt like God was blocking your breakthrough. But then, 6 months later, the truth came out. The fraud, the scandal, the people who lost everything. And you realized, I was one signature away from destruction. That's when you understand. God didn't block your blessing, he blocked your burial. Do you see it now? Can you feel the weight of it? Every closed door you've been angry about. Every delayed plan you've been bitter about. Every removed person you've been grieving over. What if it was all God stepping between you and a line you couldn't see? Because here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know. He doesn't just attack you with obvious evil. He attacks you with almost good, with near perfect, with things that looked like answered prayer but would have led you straight across that line into territory where God's protection couldn't follow. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 16:9, in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Did you catch that? You make the plans, but God establishes the steps. And sometimes establishing your steps means blocking the path you wanted to take. But here's where it gets beautiful. Here's where the story shifts from tragedy to triumph. You thought God was removing things from your life, but he was removing things from your path. You thought he was taking things away, but he was clearing the way. You thought he was saying no to you, but he was saying yes to your destiny. Every person he removed was a person who would have stopped you from becoming who you're meant to be. Every door he closed was a door that led to a dead end. Every plan he delayed was a plan that would have put you in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now, right now, the same God who drew that line, the same God who said, "Don't cross here," is standing on the other side of your obedience, saying, "Come closer, I made a way." Not the way you wanted, but a way you can survive. A way that leads to life, not destruction. Do you remember the story of Balaam in Numbers 22? He was riding his donkey toward a destination he was convinced was right. But the donkey saw something Balaam couldn't see, an angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword. 3 times the donkey refused to move forward. 3 times Balaam beat the animal in frustration, until finally God opened Balaam's eyes and he saw the truth. The donkey wasn't being stubborn. The donkey was saving his life. How many times has God used closed doors like that donkey? How many times has he blocked your path because he could see the sword you couldn't? How many times has he let you be frustrated with delays because he knew what was waiting around the corner? God steps in when destiny is at risk. He doesn't intervene in every disappointment. But when you're about to cross a line that would derail everything he's been building in you, when you're one decision away from destroying what he's been protecting, that's when heaven moves. That's when doors slam shut with supernatural force. That's when plans fall apart in ways that defy explanation. And if you're honest, you've seen it happen. You've felt his hand stop you. You've experienced the divine interruption. You've known the moment when everything that should have worked didn't, and you couldn't understand why until now. Isaiah 55:8 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." What looks like rejection from your perspective is often protection from his. What feels like abandonment is actually intervention. So, let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. What if the worst thing that almost happened to you was actually the best thing God did for you? If you feel God intervened in your life before, if you can look back now and see how he saved you from something you were running toward, comment right now, "He saved me." Let heaven know you recognize the rescue. Let others who are standing at their own line see that God is faithful to those who trust him. Because here's what's about to happen next. Now that you understand that God has been protecting you, now that you see he's been drawing lines for your good, the question becomes, will you trust the line he's drawing right now? You want to know what makes a chosen one different? It's not the miracles they perform. It's not the anointing they carry. It's what they refused to do when no one was watching. Let me tell you something that's going to shift everything you think you know about spiritual authority. The power you carry tomorrow is determined by the line you refuse to cross today. Every single time you stand at that threshold and say, "No, not me, not today," something divine happens in the unseen realm. Angels take notes, demons retreat, and God marks you. Marked, not for judgment, for promotion. You see, when you refuse to cross that line, when you walk away from the conversation that would have destroyed your peace, when you delete that number that would have compromised your calling, when you close that door, even though your flesh is screaming to walk through it, you don't just avoid disaster, you activate transformation. You are not who you were before the line. You are upgraded. Think about Daniel. Babylon wanted him to eat the king's food, drink the king's wine, bow to the king's gods, simple requests, harmless on the surface. Everyone else was doing it. But Daniel drew a line. Daniel 1-8 says, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine." One decision, one boundary, one refusal to cross the line everyone else was crossing. And what happened? 10 days later, Daniel and his friends looked healthier than everyone who had feasted at the king's table. But that wasn't the real miracle. The real miracle was what God did inside Daniel's spirit. He gave him discernment that could interpret dreams, wisdom that could counsel kings, authority that could shut the mouths of lions. That's what happens when you don't cross the line. God doesn't just protect you from consequence, he elevates you into a dimension the compromisers will never access. But let me get personal with you for a moment. How many of you right now are carrying burdens that aren't yours because you crossed a line you knew you shouldn't have crossed? How many of you are stuck in conversations that drain you, relationships that diminish you, situations that were never part of God's plan for your life, all because you took one step past the boundary? I'm talking to the grandmother who's been enabling her adult son's addiction because you're afraid if you draw the line, you'll lose him completely. I'm talking to the grandfather who keeps lending money to family members who never pay it back because you're terrified of being called selfish. I'm talking to every senior saint who has spent 70, 80, 90 years putting everyone else's needs before your own boundaries, and now you're exhausted, depleted, wondering why God feels distant. God feels distant because you've been living on the wrong side of the line He drew for your protection. But here's the beauty of God's mercy. It's never too late to come back. It's never too late to redraw the boundary. It's never too late to say, I crossed the line, but I'm not staying here. Let me tell you about Sarah. Not the Sarah from the Bible, Sarah from Brooklyn, 83 years old. For 40 years, she let her daughter manipulate her, guilt her, drain her savings, and destroy her peace. Every phone call was a crisis. Every visit ended in tears. And Sarah kept crossing the line, kept giving in, kept sacrificing her sanity because she thought that's what good Christian mothers do. Until one Sunday morning, she heard a sermon about boundaries, and something broke inside her. That week, Sarah made a phone call that changed her life. She told her daughter, I love you, but I can't keep doing this. The money stops. The crisis management stops. I'm drawing a line, and I'm not crossing it anymore. Her daughter hung up on her, didn't speak to her for 3 months. And during those 3 months, Sarah told me she experienced a peace she hadn't felt in 4 decades. She started sleeping through the night. Her blood pressure dropped. She began painting again, something she'd given up 30 years ago. But here's where God moved. On the 4th month, her daughter called, crying. Not in crisis, in repentance. Mom, I don't know what happened, but I got help. I'm in therapy. I'm learning to stand on my own, and I'm sorry. When you refuse to cross the enemy's line, God draws new lines of blessing around you. This is what a chosen one looks like after refusing to cross the line. You carry discernment that sees through manipulation before it takes root. You carry strength under pressure that doesn't crumble when people withdraw their approval. You carry quiet authority that doesn't need to justify your boundaries to anyone. You carry spiritual clarity that can distinguish between God's voice and the noise of guilt. You carry steady courage that says, I'd rather stand alone with God than compromise for company. Chosen ones rise differently. Not on hype, not on emotion, not on the approval of the crowd. They rise on obedience to boundaries that no one else understands. Proverbs 4:23 commands us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guard. That's a military term. That's a war term. Your heart isn't just something to protect, it's a fortress to defend. And every time you refuse to cross the line, you're standing guard over the territory God gave you. If you believe God has transformed you through your obedience, if you know you're different because of the lines you refuse to cross, type, I am chosen right now, because what I'm about to tell you next will reveal the cost of crossing the line and why some people never recover. Beloved chosen one, as we come to the end of this sacred moment together, I need you to hold on to 3 eternal truths that will anchor your soul in the days ahead. First, the line is real. God draws boundaries not to limit you, but to protect you. Every warning you felt in your spirit, every hesitation before a decision, every time something whispered, stop, that was divine love keeping you from destruction. Second, your obedience matters more than you know. When you refuse to cross the line, you're not just avoiding consequences, you're activating blessings. You're stepping into a dimension of favor that the compromisers will never access. You are being marked, elevated, transformed. And third, it's never too late to come back. If you've crossed lines you shouldn't have crossed, if you're living on the wrong side of boundaries God set for your protection, hear me clearly. God is still working in your life. He hasn't given up on you. This message found you because mercy is calling you home. But you are not walking this path alone. Right now, across this nation, there are thousands of chosen ones just like you, carrying the same struggles, fighting the same battles, drawing the same lines. We are your family. We see you, we understand you, and we will pray with you. So let me ask you this. Now that you know where the line is, now that you understand the cost of crossing it and the blessing of refusing it, what will you choose tomorrow when that moment comes? Before you go, let me place my hand on your shoulder through these words and pray over you with everything in me. Heavenly Father, I lift up every precious soul who has stayed with us through this entire message. Lord, you know the lines they're standing at right now. You know the decisions they're facing. You know the pressure they feel to compromise, to give in, to cross boundaries you've set for their protection. God, I pray for supernatural strength to flow into their spirit right now. Give them the courage to say no when everything in them wants to say yes. Give them discernment to see the line before they cross it. Give them wisdom to draw boundaries without guilt, without fear, without apology. Father, bless their relationships, their finances, their health, their families. Protect them from manipulation, from guilt, from the voices that try to shame them for standing firm. Surround them with people who honor their boundaries instead of testing them. Open doors that no man can shut, close doors that lead to destruction. And when they stand at the threshold of temptation, let your hand stop them mid-step, just like you're stopping them right now. In Jesus' mighty name, Amen. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us what line God is calling you to respect. Ask for prayer. This community will surround you. And please, share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Someone is standing at their line right now, and this video might be the warning that saves their life. Thank you for staying until the very end. That tells me everything about your heart. You're serious about your walk with God. If you haven't subscribed, hit that button now. This family is growing, and we need you in it. You are chosen, you are protected, and you are never, ever alone.